At a secluded mansion on Cielo Drive lived Sharon Tate. Sharon's life was cruelly cut short that night, along with 4 others present in the home. 1969, Leno and Rosemary LaBianca were brutally murdered in their home, in chilling messages left behind by the Manson himself reportedly selected the LaBianca home that night. It was the summer of 1969, a time when America's counterculture was blossoming, and the promise of peace and love seemed within reach. But beneath the surface of this idyllic moment, darkness was stirring. In Los Angeles, a brutal nightmare would soon unfold. 5 people would be for 2 nights, their deaths shocking the nation and forever changing the way we see evil. At the center of this horror was a man who became the face of a man who didn't pull the trigger, but whose influence turned his followers into his name, Charles Manson. Who was Charles Manson? How did a petty become a cult leader, commanding blind devotion and orchestrating a reign of What drove him? Was it pure madness, cold calculation, or something deeper? This is the story of the man behind the cult that followed him, and the chilling legacy he left behind. In this video, we will take you from Manson's turbulent childhood to the bloody nights that made headlines, from the shocking trial to his decades in prison, and the ongoing fascination that surrounds his dark story. Stay with us as we peel back the layers of deception, power, and madness in the true story of Charles Manson. To understand the man who would become Charles Manson, we must begin at the very beginning. A beginning marked by neglect, hardship, and a desperate search for identity. Born Charles Mills Maddox on November 12, 1934, in Cincinnati, Ohio, his entry into the world was anything but ordinary. His mother, Kathleen Maddox, was just 16 years old, a troubled young woman caught in a cycle of abuse and poverty. She was often in trouble with the law and unable to care for her son. Almost immediately, Charles was passed from one foster home to another. His father was absent, unknown, a ghost in his early life. The instability shaped him deeply. At a young age, Charles learned the harsh reality of survival. He faced and neglect, and a sense of abandonment that left deep emotional scars. By the time he was 8 years old, he was already beginning to act out, stealing small things, lying, testing the boundaries of the broken system around him. Out of the swirling chaos of 1960s California, Charles Manson began gathering followers. Young, impressionable souls searching for meaning in a fractured world. What started as a group of runaways and lost youth quickly transformed into a tightly knit, almost fanatical community known simply as the family. The family was a strange mix of vulnerability and danger. Young women homes, men disillusioned with society, all drawn to Manson's promise of love, protection, and spiritual enlightenment. Manson's charisma was magnetic. He used a blend of charm, manipulation, and intimidation to control those around him. The family's isolation at Spahn Ranch created a pressure cooker environment. Paranoia, loyalty, and escalated. It was here the deadly plans would take shape. The Manson family was no longer just a group of lost souls. It was a dangerous cult ready to unleash chaos on the world. At the core of the Manson family's terrifying was a twisted and apocalyptic ideology, a belief system born in the fractured mind of Charles Manson. This belief was called Helter Skelter, a term Manson borrowed from a Beatles song, but warped into a prophecy of racial war and destruction. Manson was obsessed with the Beatles, convinced that their music contained secret messages predicting an imminent race war, an uprising between Americans. According to Manson, this war would destroy civilization, but he believed he and his family would survive by hiding underground, emerging afterward to rule the ashes of a new world. The late 1960s were a time of intense social upheaval. The civil rights movement, urban riots, events Manson twisted to fit his vision. He preached that the committed by his followers would ignite this helter-skelter and bring about the chaos he craved. This apocalyptic ideology wasn't just a fantasy, it was a deliberate justification for the were meant to society, to spark the race war Manson envisioned. At the crime scenes, the left messages, cryptic, disturbing, designed to confuse investigators and spread fear. These chilling symbols were meant to ignite and hide the true mastermind behind the Manson's ideology was a dangerous cocktail of manipulation, delusion, and social rage, a weaponized belief system that turned vulnerable followers into To understand the horrific crimes that followed, we must understand how this dark vision took root. On the night of August 8, 1969, an ordinary Los Angeles neighborhood became the scene of a horrific crime that would forever scar the city's history. At a secluded mansion on Cielo Drive lived Sharon Tate, a rising starlet and wife of famed director Roman Polanski. Pregnant and full of promise, Sharon's life was cruelly cut short that night, along with 4 others present in the home. The victims that night included Sharon Tate, her friends Jay Sebring, a prominent hairstylist, Abigail Folger, a socialite and heiress, Wojciech Frykowski, a friend of the couple, and Stephen Parent, a visitor caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. Under the direction of Charles Manson, members of the cult carried out a calculated and Stephen Parent outside the property as he left, an innocent bystander caught in the horror. Inside, the remaining victims were confronted with unimaginable. The attackers forced their way into the house, binding and attacking their victims. Sharon Tate, in the final stages of pregnancy, showed courage in the face of but the inflicted that night ended their lives tragically. The scene left behind is one of devastation, a brutal reminder of the darkness that had taken root. The gruesome nature of the stunned the nation. Messages written on the walls in blood. The word pig scrawled to shock and confuse investigators. Questions flooded the public consciousness. How could such evil occur in a peaceful neighborhood? Who was responsible? This massacre marked the start of a series of crimes that brought the terrifying influence of Charles Manson and his followers into sharp and horrifying focus. Just one night after the horrific at Cielo Drive, unleashed by Charles Manson's followers continued, plunging Los Angeles into deeper shock and fear. On the evening of August 9, 1969, Leno and Rosemary LaBianca, a seemingly ordinary couple living in Los Feliz, were brutally in their home. Like the Tate, this crime was marked by fear and chilling messages left behind by the Manson himself reportedly selected the LaBianca home that night, directing his followers to carry out the part of the so-called helter-skelter prophecy. Leno LaBianca, a successful supermarket executive, and Rosemary, a homemaker, in a manner eerily similar to the night before. The victims were bound repeatedly and left with terrifying messages written on the walls in their own blood. These messages were intended as symbols to mislead law enforcement and ignite racial tensions, fueling the chaotic vision Manson had instilled in his followers. The LaBianca deepened the horror and confusion gripping the city, showing that the previous night's was not an isolated incident, but part of a calculated plan of. The police response was immediate and intense, but the mystery surrounding the motive and mastermind only grew, feeding a media frenzy and public paranoia. Together, the Tate and LaBianca exposed the terrifying extent of Charles Manson's influence, a web of control and violence that would soon be unraveled through one of the most famous criminal investigations in American history. In the wake of the brutal Tate and LaBianca, Los Angeles was gripped by fear and confusion. The police faced enormous pressure to solve the crimes and capture those responsible for the shocking. Initial leads were scarce. The chaotic crime scenes offered few clues, messages left in blood, victims with no apparent connection, and no immediate suspects. Yet detectives worked tirelessly, following every lead, interviewing witnesses, and piecing together the puzzle. A breakthrough came when an unrelated arrest led police closer to the Manson family. In October 1969, a member of the family, Susan Atkins, was arrested for an unrelated crime, and it was she who eventually provided damning testimony against Manson and the others. Atkins, along with other former family members, confessed to their roles in the detailing chilling accounts of Manson's control and the nightmarish events. Through painstaking investigation, authorities arrested Charles Manson and several of his followers, including Patricia Krenwinkel, Leslie Van Houten, and Charles Tex Watson. These arrests brought to light the full horror of the family's crimes and the twisted ideology behind them. The media frenzy escalated, painting Manson as the face of evil, a cult leader who manipulated and destroyed lives with terrifying ease. The investigation revealed not only the gruesome details of but also the extent of Manson's psychological hold over his followers, a mix of fear, loyalty, and delusion. As the legal process unfolded, the nation watched closely, eager to understand how such darkness could arise within its own borders. The trial of Charles Manson and his followers began in June 1970, one of the most sensational and highly publicized court cases in American history. The courtroom was packed, media attention was relentless, and the nation was captivated by every moment. Manson, seated in the defendant's chair, exuded a bizarre mixture of charisma and menace, often smiling, taunting the court and disrupting proceedings. The prosecution detailed the horrific crimes, presenting testimonies from former family members and survivors, revealing the chilling control Manson wielded over his followers. The defense tried to portray the defendants as victims of brainwashing, unable to control their own actions under Manson's influence. But the jury was confronted with harrowing evidence: the blood-written messages, and the calculated nature of the crimes. After months of testimony and deliberation, the jury found Charles Manson, Susan Atkins, Patricia Krenwinkel, and Leslie Van Houten guilty of first-degree and conspiracy to commit. They were sentenced to death, though their sentences were later commuted to life imprisonment when California abolished the death penalty. The trial revealed the dark depths of human manipulation, marking an era of lost innocence for the nation. Following conviction, Charles Manson and several of his followers were incarcerated for life, their names forever etched in criminal infamy. Manson continued to cultivate a cult-like following, even from behind bars, embodying the defiance and darkness that had marked his life. Despite multiple parole hearings, Manson was repeatedly denied release, a symbol of the horrific legacy he left behind. Other family members faced similar fates, serving long prison terms with varying degrees of remorse and reflection. Manson's saga continued to fascinate and horrify, a grim reminder of how charismatic evil can twist vulnerable lives. The Manson were more than just a crime story. They marked a cultural turning point in America. The late 1960s counterculture, with its ideals of peace, love, and freedom, was forever stained by this chapter. Shattered the illusion of the free-spirited hippie movement, exposing a darker side of idealism turned deadly. Manson became a symbol of the dangers of blind faith and manipulation, a warning about the power of cults and charismatic leaders. Films, books, and endless media coverage have kept the story alive, fueling public fascination and horror for decades. Behind the headlines and infamy, the Manson are a devastating human tragedy. The lives lost: Sharon Tate, Jay Sebring, Abigail Folger, Wojciech Frykowski, Leno, and Rosemary LaBianca were vibrant individuals whose stories deserve remembrance. Their families continue to honor their memories, seeking to preserve the dignity that was stolen on those dark nights. The case also sparked advances in law enforcement, forensic science, and public awareness about cult dynamics, important lessons born from horror. Charles Manson's life was a descent into darkness, manipulation, a chilling chapter in America's history. His crimes remind us how easily power can be abused and how vulnerable people can fall prey to charismatic yet dangerous figures. As we look back, it's crucial to remember not just the evil, but the lives lost, the courage of survivors, and the lessons learned. The shadow of Manson looms large, a testament to the fragility of trust and the importance of vigilance. Thank you for watching this deep dive into the life and crimes of Charles Manson. But before you go, we want to introduce you to our previous gripping story, the case of Ruby Frank. Ruby Frank was a mother whose strict and parenting methods led to heartbreaking and tragic consequences for her children. If you found today's video insightful, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring you more in-depth, compelling stories like these. And thanks for being part of our community, and we'll see you in the next video.